Last week we talked about emotions, and one of the emotions that we highlighted was grief. So we're gonna continue on talking about grief and make a little bit of changes into some things for tonight. So the most intense um, form of grief. Can anybody tell me what that is? The most intense form of grief.
The loss of a loved one.
Okay. Okay. So when we look at the loss of a loved one, we want to think about what grief is. And grief is a natural response to a loss. It is the emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. Okay, and that's death. So why do you think death is so intense?
So intense.
You
Because
got up
there's
there,
no recovery.
wait, no recovery. What you have is no recovery and no coming back.
Okay, no return to normal. We can give some examples of it. You know when you die, that's definite. That's forever, right? So that means that person is gone from your life, gone from your activities, gone from your dinner table. A lot of times, gone from your bedroom. That person is completely gone out of your life, and they're not coming back. No matter how much it hurts for you to see that they have left you, that person is not coming back.
It's
And because they,
final too.
ma'am,
It's final.
Physical.
it's final, right? And because of these things, there is no returning to normal life. Life will never, never, never be the same because of the impact that that person has had on your life. Okay, and there's no communication with that person. It is the complete end of life as we know it, right?
Correct.
Okay, death is irreversible. It's the irreversible cessation of all vital functions, especially as indicated by permanent stoppage of the heart, respiration, and brain activity. It's the end of life. And when someone says death, how does that make you feel when you hear that someone has died or a death has occurred in someone's family? Maybe not necessarily your own.
You're saddened.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Sometimes you're anxious,
Sometimes even angry.
angry, in disbelief.
Sympathy.
Okay. Can a death make you hostile?
Yes,
Yes.
it
I would
can.
think so.
Okay. Why do you think we feel hostile when someone has died?
A lot of times you might think it's unfair.
Okay.
And you have no control over it.
Right. And
You
you hear
got
people say, if I could have taken their place, you know, especially when it's someone young, they died too soon, they left us too soon. So it leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions. Death is a permanent cessation of all biological functions. Everything about a person stops at death. Okay. There's no holding on to them. This is the end. So we're going to look a little bit at grief versus bereavement because, as Pastor was saying, we're going to do part two on bereavement. So I was trying to tie grief and bereavement together. So will grief and bereavement, as you know it, share the same emotions? Will you feel some of the same emotions if you're going through grief that you would if you were going through bereavement?
I would think so.
I think so.
Okay. And you would, they
because
would share,
I would say yes.
okay? You would share the same emotions.
Well,
Mourning,
Sister Alexander said something last week about how you could be grieving the loss of a habit that you had, and people that really are grieving over that. So I was thinking about that when you asked that question. Uh, what is the emotions? It could be all kinds of things, I guess.
right? We go through all types of emotions, worry. If that person was the financial part of the family and they're gone, you worry about bills, right?
Yeah.
How you gonna make it? How you gonna pay your bills? Loneliness. You're sitting at the dinner table and it's normally two of you and now there's one. And sometimes that a habit, you may set a place for the other person or cook enough food, and then you have to stop yourself saying, "Oh no, what am I doing? I don't need that much. That person's not here. I'm by myself." You know, and you may feel disappointed, depression, empty,
you got that heavy burden.
heavy burden. You may feel gloom, like sad all the time, crying when nobody's bothering you. No, I was by now all of you know I have issues with my eye, and I was in Walmart and I was looking at a label, and for about 5 minutes it really bothered me because I looked at the label and I couldn't see what the label was saying, and it really, really, really bothered me. It's not a death, but it's still like a grief, something that I'm going through, you know. And as I walked around in Walmart, it started dawning on me, okay, what if I never am able to see up close again, to read the label? And, all these things started going through my head, and I just felt real lonely. I wanted to call Jeanette. I said, no, she's in school. I wanted to call my friend Beverly. I said, no, I won't bother her. Said I called one of my other friends. I said, no, she'll tell somebody. I told her, but I had to talk myself out of um some of the feelings that I was starting to feel that's shown on the screen because of what I was going through. So if you can imagine going through a death and having to go through some of the same emotions, and having to um, talk yourself out of it or try to find someone to listen to you, talk yourself through it, these emotions. And that's one of the things we need to do. We need to find an outlet, be it someone to talk to, someone, just to have someone listening to us. Because if you're used to having the other person there, and now that other person is no longer there, like with couples, you say that the pillow talk is really important. And it was for me in my marriage, pillow talk, we talked about everything, and then he's no longer there. So who do you talk to when you have things going on when that person is no longer there for you to share the most intimate things that you want to talk about?
We always got one listener, and he's never sleep.
That's true. That's
So
true.
Me-
and that and that's my thing with me. Like you say, we get to those situations, and we want somebody to talk to, but a lot of times it's not there. But the great thing is, I learned is I can always talk to him. I know he's got listening ears, and he will provide for me. Because you're talking about your eyes and stuff, and it goes back here for a period of time. My eyes was constantly running water. When I was wearing reading glasses to read because I wasn't able to read without them, and I'm still not able to read without them. But I was still having that problem, and so finally I went to the doctor, and she said my eyes was good. My eyes was still good. My sight was still good, but I had a problem reading. So she said, "Well, you want glasses, or you just want to go and maybe get you some reading glasses?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "But the one thing you need to do is get another level of glasses." So just let it be known that and I say that because of You know, he's always there and he will guide you. And this is what, you know, as you were talking about that, you know, because it was him that led me to go into to deciding to go to the doctor and see what was wrong with my eyes.
Okay. And
the,
that's good. That's good, and we thank you for that, Deacon Rush. However, there are going to be times in all of our lives when we're going to find that, you know, although we have a relationship with God and we're able to talk to Him, that we're going to need human contact as well to help us through some of the things that we're going through. You know, we
Agreed.
depend on Him and we know that He's going to guide us, but there are times when He guides us to other people. You know, they're put in place to help us.
So I say it ain't just that we want them to talk to us all the time, but we need another flesh form just to vent to. So sometimes just venting and talking to somebody else about your situation, because a lot of times they can't handle, they can't tell me how to fix my situation. But I find out a lot of times that you in a moment or any kind of grief, that you can just talk to somebody and they sit and just listen. The more you talk, the more you come up with your own solution.
let me throw this scenario out. Mary and Martha and how they blamed Jesus, saying if you would have been there, our brother Lazarus wouldn't have died. And sometimes you have people um, ask the question, Lord, why you allow this to happen? Lord, why you allow this to happen? And you know, throwing blame. And with that, I just want to ask, how would you handle a person who, if you were to be in a conversation with them, and they uh, kind of like blaming Jesus for the death of a loved one?
But see, Pals, on situations like that, I talk to people like that before, and I tell them you have to look back in the mirror upon yourself and what could you have done, because it could be part of the plan. God didn't do it. He allowed these things to happen. But I always tell people, He allowed these things to happen.
I think sometimes too, if you just allow them to vent, sometimes that's when you're grieving, you just want to be able to vent. That people will self-correct. That they will come back and realize sometimes they just need to get that feeling out.
Sometimes we just want a listening ear.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we all go through that time. You know what? You know, we all at some point in our life we need a support group. You know, may it be you talking to your higher power, the pastor, or you know, your brother or sister, anybody that you can go to. You know, when you burden down, that you can talk to. You know, as long as you got a support group and you know, and who I'm gonna go to first. You know. If I'm gonna that name radio, can I go to that person? You know, a church member, you know, but it's good that everybody, you know, have some kind of support group where they can go to somebody, maybe a deacon or a trustee or some other member of the church. You know, you can go to that you can let it all out to and not worrying about it being, you know, hearing it again from somebody else. They're going to tell it.
That's true. Confidentiality is very important.
But Minister Richard, as I just love to share the response to what Brother Roger was just saying there. You know, finding someone, you know, I can truly say that I find that at Antioch for myself right now. You know, people that are willing to listen, people that are willing to share, people that are want to glorify God, and this is what you know I think keeps me with such joy. You know, knowing that I'm around some people that I can go to, and they would, you know, hear my, you know, my cry, and they're gonna be sincere with me, and they're gonna, you know, share what God needs me to do at that time. And you know, and when He said that, it just brought to mind. You know, we got a great church family, and it's overwhelming and joyful for me to be among you all. Those that are listening, those are church members, and anyone that listens, it's a great thing to just have people around you that you can always go to. And I find that at Antioch.
Okay. And if I could just throw this out, that kind of bothered me after we ended the last session, that Brother Eddie was saying about how he holds things in, and we did not um, appeal to him that you are at a church where you have a pastor and two other ministers, that you can call us so that you don't have to always hold these things in. I know that pastor will always be available to listen if you want to talk. I'm always available. I tell my friends I'm available 24/7. If you can wake me up, I'll be glad to listen. Um, Minister Bird, I know sometimes we have to respect the boundaries because she is a female and she has a husband. But I think, speaking for the ministerial staff, that we are here to help not just you, but anyone else who needs a listening ear, needs somebody to talk to, needs somebody to pray with you. We're here. We are here to help you. Okay.
And I would like to add myself to that list. If you can get me wake, I'm willing to listen, and I will share with you what God gives me, not me, but what God gives me to give you.
Okay. So now we've looked at a lot of different emotions, and we can all agree, I think, that these will not be the same for everyone. There's no one way to grieve. There's no one way to go through bereavement. Okay, to express despair, sorrow, sadness. There is no one that can tell you that this is the only way to do it. That the only way to get through it is to cry. The only way to get through it is to stay on your knees, because at some point you got to get up and put things into action. And God will allow you to get up and put things into action. You got to still move on, because you're still going to be here. And life for you doesn't end because the life of someone else has ended. Any questions or comments? Okay. The answer is no, it does not. So let's look again at grief. Grief is an emotion that overcomes us when there is a sudden loss of a loved one. And that loved one does not have to be a family member. It could be a friend, um, a distant relative. Grief is our emotional response to the loss of someone we love, someone who's important to us. Okay. Now let's look at bereavement. Bereavement is the state of being in grief. Okay. It's the state of being in grief, and often described as the period after a loss during which a person feels grief. Okay, that's bereavement, and it looks like, based on the the signs and symptoms of it, they're pretty much hand in hand, except how what your situation is, if I may say. And the length of bereavement is dependent upon how close the deceased was, how much time was spent anticipating the loss before the actual loss. Does that make sense?
Ms. Richardson, sometimes when we talk about this grief and grievance, I have seen in my military travels, the grievance and the grief we have is because of the loss of a loved one for death. It's the loss of a loved one when you be with somebody so long. And it was bad in the military. You be with somebody so long, and all of a sudden they take that individual away from you and send that individual someplace else when you didn't used to being around that individual. I think churches could be the same way. When you lose an individual that go to a different church, when you used to working and being around an individual, it changes your way of thinking sometimes. And sometimes that when you really got to pull to somebody else, because you lost a part, you lost a part of your church family.
Okay, I think as we start to come upon the holiday season, that we're going to notice more and more grief, more and more people actually going through bereavement, showing signs of bereavement, because of the tremendous loss that has happened with COVID-19. We all know somebody who has been affected, directly or indirectly. And this is going to be their first holiday without that person or those people, because there are some households who lost multiple people in their families. Right?
Minister,
Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say that you are absolutely correct about that. And I can attest to that in some sense. Not that I've lost someone, but I'm from Missouri and I've been here a long time away from my family. And I get kind of emotional about that sometimes. You know, that I have a whole family over there, and I'm here, and sometimes I don't know if I'm grieving or what it is that I'm doing, but I miss home. I miss being around my family. I miss being with my sister. You know, and when I see other people together like that, sometimes it's hard for me, especially around the holidays.
Okay. Anyone else? I think I've shared before that I have issues with couples because my husband and I, we would almost always be together if I wasn't at work. So to see Ellis, you and Terry, our pastor and Sister Alexander, like the comment, and some of you may not have heard that he made out on the church ground on Saturday when Sister Alexander said she didn't recognize him over there, but he recognized her. Little things like that go on between people. It makes you think about what you've lost. What I can't hear my husband say things like that anymore. Teeth are cut up or whatnot. When I see when we were back at church, and I see Pearlie and Mikhail come up, just to see them standing out and how she lights up when he comes around. Things like that. It's hard, when you see couples interacting. And it's been, almost 6 years now, but it's still, I'm still going through that, when you see somebody. So you're never really over things. You're never really over the person. Even with Jeanette's sister Brenda, I can think about things that she used to say, and it's like she's right there. Because she would say, if you know Brenda, she would say some things that would really, kind of knock you off. But, just to remember some of the things. So we never really forget our people. And so I think with that it's like it kind of leads bereavement on to keep on moving, because you have to keep living. You're never going to forget that person because they're a part of your life. Okay. Anyone has anything they want to say right now? Okay. So what is the difference, or is there a difference between grief and bereavement? Because grief is a feeling or an emotion that is felt by us whenever there's a loss of a loved one. And I know it's like keep saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, but there is really no way to really define it other than the same way. Grief is the emotional response of an individual. It's how you respond to certain things, and we grieve differently. And it's almost like wordplay or words of friends. It means the same thing. They're interchangeable somewhat.
And I think of it like when you look at the bereavement as a period, it's a simple way for me is to look at bereavement as the time frame that you're going through those emotions, going through all of these that you have listed, whether it's you being angry, being sad, just feeling lost. So that the period that you go through those emotions, I would say is the bereavement. But like you said, it's interchangeable. I mean, it's like you can't have one without the other.
Okay.
I think another form of bereavement is, that like you got a loved one, that person got cancer or terminal illness, and you bereavement, you have grief for that person the whole while watching them day in, day out. But just knowing that sooner or later they're gonna die, but you don't know when, that That way there's a lot right there is on the taking, because you don't know how long that person's gonna be around, but you do know he's gonna die. So you grieving that day, but once that person dies, a lot of times you be already got all your grieving out, because you already anticipate that person dying. So now you ain't caught by surprise, because you know that day was coming. You kind of got over it, and you kind of get a little sense of relief, because especially you watch that person over a long period of time. And that kind of like ease some of the pain, so where you ain't grieving quite as hard.
Would anyone like to comment on that?
I would like to say for some people, that process might begin and might be even worse, because when you started out talking about one of the hardest ones, when we talk about death, it's final. But, like you were saying, if that person has cancer and you're seeing them diminishing, getting sicker and sicker, they're still there. You can look at them, but sometimes you're already going through, like the brother said, you're already grieving them, because especially if they aren't, always alert or awake, you're already beginning to grieve that loss. But I think when they actually die, it kind of like it takes you through a whole nother kind of grief, because of the fact that it's final. You're not going to see that person again, and then you can start experiencing some of the emotions that we're talking about.
I agree, because like right now my father is sick, and he's lost vision in one of his eyes, and his health is really diminishing. I mean, it's like he's, you know, almost down to 100 pounds. And for me to just watch him, yes, I think I'm grieving, but I really do love my father. I mean, I'm a daddy's girl. I always have been. And should he close his eyes before me, I can't tell you that I'm not going to fall apart. Just being real about it. I know that one day we all got to go, and I believe that. But it's just based on your relationship with that person as to how you respond. No matter, I don't think anything can really prepare you completely for that finalness that death brings about. You know, when when my husband passed, I wasn't expecting him to go. We went to bed one night, and I woke up the next morning, and he didn't. You know, it's just the way it happens. So, it's all in, I think your belief in God, and your strength, and your support system really has a lot to do with how you get through things. Not get over them, but how you get through them.
Minister Richardson, the scripture talks about, it doesn't say that we won't grieve. It just says that we won't grieve like the unbelievers,
Right.
as if there's no hope. So it doesn't say that we won't grieve, but we will grieve differently,
Hmm.
because we have a greater hope.
But
Right.
Mr. Richardson, as you speak of, these things and stuff, and I'm one that I can imagine how you might feel about your father, because he's always a person that loved to enjoy and have and love to laugh and carry on. I knew him that way. We used to be out there in ball games and stuff together, and we used to always talk to each other, stuff like that. But in saying that, as I last week's lesson, I left with thoughts and stuff like that, and I just wasn't comfortable with what I received, and it wasn't you, it just was me, because I went back. I had to go back to my Bible, my study Bible, and I went back and I went to reading the purpose of this his writing here. And it let it be known that there are things in our lives, remember the first 8 verses is a time for everything. And as I read and studied that, I went back today and I sat down, and because I said, well, it bothered me. And I went back and I started reading the purpose of stuff. And I just love to share a couple of things here, when we talk about this grief and stuff like that. But and let it be known that, these are, sometimes we have to let go and let God, because he even says here in the introduction, says human endeavors are meaningless. Pursuing human wisdom is meaningless. Seeking pleasure is meaningless. Human wisdom is meaningless. Toiling to accumulate things is meaningless. And so when I thought about that, it just let me know we're talking about grief and the emotions that we go through, but this is not what God wants us to do. And it just came to mind when I sat and read that. I said, well, he let it be known that we're gonna go through these things, we're gonna grieve, we're gonna have these emotions. But this is not what he wanted us to do, and he wanted, and that's why I say, we can always go to him.
Okay. Now I've listed a few things that people sometimes should or should not say when you're going through grief or any type of sadness, and it's mostly bereavement. But sometimes people will say to you that everyone will experience one of these emotions at some time in our lives as relates to death of a loved one. Okay, that's one of the things that you'll hear people say, that everybody's going to go through this, but what they don't tell you is that everybody might not go through it the same way. Okay, you can never be fully prepared for the loss, grief, or bereavement period. Do you think you can fully prepare? I think based on the conversation that we've had already, you can't ever be fully prepared because of the uncertainty of the time and the hour which it's going to happen.
No, because just going back to Brother Eddie, he was talking about how you watch people deteriorate and then eventually they die. And you would think that would build you up stronger to be prepared for something like that. But like my wife say, when the actual death comes, it takes it to a different perspective because that person is no longer there with you. So you can't really prepare yourself for that. And um, maybe there are people that might try, but you know, I haven't experienced that with anybody that I've had to deal with bereavement because everybody takes it different, and then just that moment. And I've been with people, and I've seen people that actually died right there, praying with some of them, and it's a different, it's a difference, a big difference, because that person is no longer there. It's final, and all you have is memories. In that arena, in that area, we have to understand that like you said, and we were talking about people grieve differently, and we have to respect that. We have to be mindful. I think I said this on last week. You have to be mindful how you approach people and what to say. And one of the most important things is you have to be led by the Lord. Every time I get information that somebody has passed, on the way going there, I'm asking the Lord to tell me how to act, what to say, because you don't know how people might respond to death. So you have to be led by the Spirit, but you have to be mindful of that person's feelings.
Okay, and people will say hurtful things. They will, and sometimes people say it just to say it, but we have to be prepared because this is just how things are. People will say things that you won't agree with, especially about your loved one, and other family members come around and they may say something that you don't agree with, but and sometimes they lash out because they don't know what else to do. Okay. And death brings out the best and the worst in families, and we all know families can really act up when somebody leaves. Right? We've all experienced that at some point, whether it's distant or close. Families fall apart. When somebody dies, families will fall apart. Sometimes, people don't speak to each other for long periods of time. It's just something that happens. Um, Sometimes death can make you question your life, make you question your faith, your purpose here, or your goals. It will make you start to look at things differently, whether good or bad, to see what you can improve on or what you can change. Any questions or comments?
I have to agree with that statement all, because as I look at, and my experiences and stuff like that today, I'm always, questioning my life. Am I fulfilling what God would have for me to do when I see others that I've been around and they are gone, and I question my life, am I doing what God would have for me to do? What is my purpose? These are the things that I deal with on a daily, well, I would say maybe on a daily basis, but frequently, question myself, where's my faith? Where's my purpose? And what are my goals? But one thing I found out now, I feel like, it's just God just allowed me to enjoy my life now with my purpose and goal, because I find people that seem to that love. And this is what I look for in life. Now, I don't want to talk to you about nothing negative. I wanted to be, Mama always said, if you ain't got nothing good to say about a person, don't say anything. And these are the things that this statement here can make you question your life, your faith, your purpose, and your goals. I'm a believer that if you about doing the will of God, these there are many of these that you would be categories you would fit into.
And a lot of times we hear, like, especially if an elderly person or someone who we know was rooted and grounded in Christ and lived a good spiritual, as we like to say, life, then, you look at the children and sometimes they'll say, well, or the minister would say, if you want to see mama again, if you want to see daddy again, this is what you got
Amen.
to do. You got to live, a life like she lived. You got to get your life together, get your life in order. And then they, sometimes it'll make them stop and think, okay, I know Granny didn't want me living this way, so let me just get things together because I really want to see Granny again because I miss her, you know, things like that.
That's my mother.
Okay. So you want to see your mama again? Okay.
Very much so. And she is the one that I tell anybody, she's the one that that I thinks about when, because I knew how much she loved the Lord. I didn't know it then, when she made me, if I was planning on going out that night, if I didn't leave before 8:30, before we had family prayer, I wasn't going anywhere.
Mm, okay. People love to judge how you're doing. They like to try to look at you and tell if you're doing good. Oh, you still grieving. Oh, you haven't gotten over it. You need to let that go. Things like that. They don't know how you feel. There's no way for you to know or look at me and tell that I'm not okay. Or for that matter that I am okay. There are many days you'll feel completely alone, whether you're alone or not. I used to tell people I feel lonely in a crowd because it's like I'm just there. And I don't know if any of you ever felt lonely in a crowd, but you can be around a lot of people, but you feel like you're still isolated from them.
You don't fit in.
Okay, don't fit in. That's the way of putting it. Yeah, you don't fit in. You're just there. You're not a part of it. Okay. Um, it can make you do stupid, crazy things. Things you would not ordinarily do. Things that people say are not in your character. Okay. And then, before COVID, people would bring a whole lot of food to your house, food that you didn't want to throw out, so you just stack up. But to let someone know that it's okay to throw out unwanted food during that time, it is okay. And sometimes people get angry with having all that food there, and they'll throw it out. Sometimes they'll try to find some place to send it, but for the most part, they throw out a lot of food. You know, It's unwanted. Sometimes they just don't want it. They don't want to eat. They don't want to have the food around, sitting around, and things of that nature. So it's okay. Um, and people will say hurtful, stupid things without even realizing it. You know, oh, you're better off without them. You know, oh, um, they must have done something to make God punish them that way. You know, people will say things. Um, then the last 24 hours will replay in your mind. You know, you keep going through the last 24 hours as though you're trying to look for something, some cue that will let you know, that would have let you know that that person is on their way out. And holidays, anniversaries, and birthdays will be hard. Sometimes they get a little easier. Sometimes you're able to mask it better. But you never really get over it because that person is never going to be there again. And you can't replace them.
Mr. Richardson, when you mentioned masking, they're not getting over it, but they may be able to mask it. So many of the women that I speak with or read their assessments, so many of them start using drugs, or they increase the amount of drugs that they're using to mask the pain that they're going through. It's kind of like just taking away that, they don't have to feel that pain. And then when the drug is removed, as I was talking about last week, it's a loss. And then those, feelings come back up, and it's almost like you're forced to deal with it. So if the death happened 5 years ago, but you've been masking, finding a way to mask it, regardless of how some people just get involved in their work so much that, they become a workaholic, and so that they don't have to deal with the pain. But when it gets to the point where you don't have anything to cover it up and those feelings start resurfacing, you might have thought, like you said, they masked, you may have thought that they have gotten through that grieving process, or it may have appeared that way. But then it's like it's starting all over again. Like you said, remembering those last 24 hours, it's almost like it just happened, and you're forced sometimes to have to deal with that pain.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Lastly, seasons never last. Ecclesiastes says there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die. Okay. It's a time for everything. We live through 4 seasons of the year, each year that God allows us to live. So whatever you go through, just remember, this too shall pass. You'll move on from emotion to emotion to emotion. Thank you.